some years back you also were getting very much involved with business continuity, and we've actually just touched on it now with dealing with shareholders and directors and replacement of buildings over an indemnity period. Do you think that it's now more than ever necessary to have those business continuity plans?
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that is part of this overall picture we were talking about. Say, if we take the company sort of situation again, the directors wanting to know, you know, in the event of a loss, what the staff do, what the company does, you know, to keep the company going. I mean, if the company's going along swimmingly, it has a loss, be it a fire, whatever, and the business fails, the shareholders are going to be real grumpy with the directors if they say, well, hang on, how did you not foresee that you needed, you know, to have your computers backed up off site so that we could carry on, that staff were all going to meet in a certain area, that somebody was going to go and hire alternative premises, you know, and we were going to go and set up, and I mean, all of that needs to be set out, and it can be as detailed or as brief as required, depending on the size of the company, the complexity of the company. But you know, a good example was probably in Auckland in 1998 when the power was cut to the CBD.
Yeah.
You had some tenants who just simply closed up shop until the owners put generators on or whatever. You had others who the next day were in a motel out in Green Lane, and the business was carrying on. You know, they were
Sorted.
They were sorted. They had a plan. The staff knew exactly where they were going. They had their computers and you know, backup systems and everything in place. Hired the whole motel for, you know, a couple of months. Set everybody up, and away they went. They may have lost, you know, 2 or 3 days of business. Other ones, who knows, you know, they weren't fast enough to get a motel, or didn't think about it quickly enough, or the landlord didn't get a generator on, or whatever. You know, there were some disaster stories there.
Yeah, because I often talk about business continuity plans to a lot of my clients, and that's even the SMEs as well. And they have a real issue grasping the concept of it, because they see that insurance is going to be the sole answer to all of their problems. When you went into the business continuity side with your previous business, what was the major trigger that actually started you on that road, and why did you do it?
Well, obviously with Rushton's, there was an English connection with the, you know, the mother firm in the UK. In the UK, I think, you know, the whole business continuity planning and consulting side of things was probably much more advanced. I don't know whether it was because the companies were bigger or what the situation was, but you know, maybe the insurance industry in England was just older and more mature, and people understood the reason for these things. I really don't know why it was, but you know, we developed certain programs in Australia and in New Zealand. In Australia, they did a lot of business continuity planning with local authorities, you know, where it was kind of essential to have continuity of services and things like that. I'm not sure what the situation was in Christchurch, whether they had any continuity planning in place there. I haven't sort of really looked into it. But again, it comes back to the directors of companies and their responsibilities to protect the shareholders' assets. And if a company goes broke after a loss because they didn't have a plan in place, the director's going to be found wanting. And it's all very well to sort of fall back on directors and officers' insurance to cover any claims and all the rest of it, but that's kind of sidestepping the issue. And because my real feeling was the reason that it hasn't taken on in New Zealand is purely cost. I really believe that is the situation. I think CEOs just don't want the extra cost of putting into place a continuity plan. The fact is, it's probably a one-off plan that needs to be picked up every, you know, every 12 months and somebody go through and just see if anything's changed, if any of the contact phone numbers are different, things like, and just, I mean, if it's computerised, it can be updated by somebody on an ongoing basis. It's not a major cost. The first setup cost, yes, there will be costs, but and you know, to convince CEOs and company directors of the necessity of that expenditure, again, is one of is part of that whole risk discussion that you guys have with them. And I mean, if you keep asking them, you know, what is your business continuity? What happens if, you know, tomorrow your place is burnt to the ground? How are you going to carry your business on? And let them answer it. The biggest problem we've got, of course, is complacency. If there's been no, you know, Christchurch obviously scared the bejesus out of most people, and they all rushed around like, you know, chooks without heads, putting in place all manner of cover and making sure, oh, you know, have we got this, or have we got that? But then it all settles down, you know, a bit like what we were saying before about the insurance companies now saying, oh, we'll give you a total replacement cover, you know, no need to go to the sums insured anymore. And we just get complacent, then you have another big loss situation. And the thing with business continuity planning is, thankfully, there hasn't been a history of companies going belly up. And so CEOs look at it again and say, what's our risk exposure, you know? Probability, low. Let's move on, yeah. So that's what you're fighting against. As I say, I believe from all the discussions I had that they couldn't convince me that it wasn't a good idea, but they just couldn't see the financial benefits in doing it. And I really do think that that's what it came down to.
And there's an awful lot of businesses out there that actually operate from home, home offices. And yet we're only insuring those dwellings on replacement value subject to evaluation. But if it's actually used for businesses, or for the purpose of business, in fact only one room or two rooms, and bringing back the issue of business continuity, it sort of places the business owner into a rather interesting position.
Yeah, I mean, there's two separate issues there. One is there's probably not a great deal of difference in your replacement value cover for the asset. Yeah. I mean, the house is a house, whether you're using a couple of rooms for offices or whatever, unless you've adapted it significantly for offices, you may adjust your sums insured. And then, because the business continuity thing is a totally separate exercise, as would be the contents of the offices would be different from the house contents, you know. So
it's working out a plan, though, isn't it, as to what you want to do and how you're going to maintain business and how soon are you going to be back in your property to enable you to carry on doing your business.
Yeah, the principles are exactly the same, and they're exactly the same whether you're an Air New Zealand or whether you're a guy working out of your office at home. I mean, but as I was saying to you earlier, it depends. That simply dictates the level of detail you'd need in a business continuity plan. You know, with an outfit like Air New Zealand, the business continuity plan would be reasonably complex, but the beauty with an organisation like that, where they've got multiple buildings and things around, is in the event of a loss in one, they can move their staff into another one temporarily until they sort that out. So not that difficult to put in place. And with a guy operating out of his bedroom at home, same thing. Not that difficult to work out a business continuity plan. And can be achieved with a hell of a lot less detail than, say, in New Zealand.
One of the other things we've discussed in the past, Brian, is indemnity periods for loss of rents, but also for the rebuild of properties. And many business owners still have this viewpoint that it's only going to take 12 months for a building to be rebuilt. but due to earthquake down in Christchurch, we know that that's not correct, and we also know from the housing market that to get building consents, etc., it takes 8-9 months before any work starts to get the consent through. So, in your experience, what advice would you give to a building owner in regards to allowance of time to get a building reconstructed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from the date of the loss, you've got site clearing, consents, and in some cases, you're building under existing use rights. So, you've got very heavy restrictions on what you can rebuild, whereas in the case of a total loss, you can sometimes amend, what you've got, make adaptations and things. So there's all those manner of things, as you say, getting through council for consents. And when we do insurance reports, we're really working on the assumption that it's a one-off. That it's a one-off loss and that materials are available in the normal course of event. It'll take you 9 months, 12 months, whatever to rebuild. In the event of a catastrophic loss, an earthquake, volcanoes, whatever, all those bets are off, and who knows how long the reconstruction will take. I mean, it's a level of crystal ball gazing that we probably can't hope to. I mean, we could add value to the discussion, but quite honestly, with Christchurch, was it going to be 2 years? Was it going to be 4 years? And while you could say in an insurance valuation that, look, this is a one-off, in the event of a catastrophic loss, this indemnity period may be woefully inadequate. But I mean, how do you cover for that? That's more of a question you have to ask than we do. But I don't think there is an answer to it, because you just don't know how catastrophic the loss will be. What sort of run on building materials. I mean, I imagine you know what the delays were in Christchurch. If there was a catastrophic loss in Auckland, you could multiply the Christchurch situation by, I don't know, 3 or 4, I suppose. I certainly think that company directors have to know about those sorts of things, because quite clearly now, in the event of losses, shareholders will be looking to directors. Well, directors obviously have an obligation now to protect under OSH, to protect their staff and that, but they also have an obligation to shareholders to protect the assets of the company. And so all of those risks need to be put in front of them, and they need to make decisions on what level of cover or how they're going to deal with it. Now, they may well say, look, we believe that's an unreasonable level of insurance cover to put in place. We think if we insure for, the indemnity period is 2.5 years, just based on, demolition and new consents and construction, all the rest of it, and maybe add 6 months on as a risk premium. It would be very, very hard for shareholders then to sort of say, well, hang on, you've underinsured us and we've got this loss and that. I mean, you as a director, you're not supposed to be, a mind reader or a reader of the future. But you've addressed the risk. You've put in place what you believe to be a reasonable level of redress to cover that. And I think as long as yourselves as the brokers and that just put those issues in front of the directors, and as long as they've got the information, they can make intelligent, informed decisions on those risks. I mean, for instance, if you went to a board of a public company and said to them, well, look, these are the sums insured for all your buildings, these are your indemnity periods and so forth. Now, don't forget that in the event of a catastrophic loss, your indemnity periods may be woefully short. The first thing they'd say to you, well, John, what is the probability of a volcanic eruption in Auckland in the next 10 years? Well, what are you going to say to them? Look, you got 1 chance in 1,000, 10 chances in 1,000, 100 chances in
We're
1,000,
on the wrong side of the 1,500 years.
whatever. So then they can, with that information, they can say, well, okay, the probability of a volcanic eruption in Auckland, which is going to be our major source of loss, potentially, you know, other than maybe fire or something like that, but and then they can make informed decisions based on those risk probabilities, you know. That is something quite different from, you know, the situation I remember with Toyota in Australia, where they worked out what the highest risk exposure they had in their car assembly plant, and they worked out it was going to be their computer facility. So they built a concrete bunker around their computer facility and thought, job done, you know, we've sorted that. And of course they had a fire and all the girders buckled and came down and crushed their computer centre. So it wasn't a fire loss, it wasn't a, you know, it was something totally unforeseen by them. But that's because they probably narrowed their view down, focused too much, you know, and limited what they thought their risks were. But I think if the company directors have a comprehensive risk report in front of them, they can make informed decisions, and I think at the end of the day, as long as they have considered it and made informed decisions, the shareholders can't really hold them to account if some unforeseen thing happens.
Family trusts owning buildings. The trustees have the same level of responsibilities as a director to shareholders.
Absolutely, and probably historically in law terms more so.
Yeah.